I didn't hit record again. That's the second time I've done that now. That's really annoying. Hello, my name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and welcome to my race weekend review for round number 8 for the Italian Grand Prix around the circuit of Monza. The Temple of Speed, the Circuita Magica. I think that's right in Italian, I'm not 100% sure. It is the Temple of Speed, the fastest straight line track on the circuit. The circuit you spend the most time on full throttle, fastest general speed, I think it's something like that. But yes, we are back at Monza finally. Last year we had Charles Leclerc's sensational Ferrari victory. I feel like I said that in my pre-race review, but this year we are unfortunately going to see them struggle and possibly Mercedes succeed. I say possibly as they may trip over their heels, I'm not 100% sure. But as always, we will start with the little contents page that I pop up here, skip to whichever section you would like me to listen or like me to talk over. Skip to whichever bit you would like me to talk about, practice, qualifying, or the race. But we will start, as always, with practice and jump straight on in to practice 1, dominated by the Mercedes, back to their usual selves unlike 1 week ago where they weren't always at the top. However, it was Max Verstappen who caused a bit of a stir, spinning at the Ascari chicane actually, losing his front wing and finishing P5, testing an extremely low downforce setup to try and match the Mercedes, but I don't think it's going to pay off too well. Anyway, Alex Albon, P3 as well for Red Bull, 1.5 tenths faster than Max Verstappen, with the AlphaTauris, P4 and P6. And even if Verstappen did go a little bit quicker had he not spun and lost his front wing, they'd have been 5th and 6th on the medium tyres. They managed to get just 0.5 tenth back from Albon in the Red Bull on the slower tyre. That AlphaTauri this weekend has some serious pace, unless the top teams or the teams below, like the Racing Points and the McLarens on the soft tyres, turn up the wick just a little bit. But looking slightly further down that order, we do have Racing Point down in P7 above McLaren, above Norris, with Ricciardo in the Renault down in 9th and Ocon 12th. Traditionally though, we have seen Renault sort of show their true pace a little bit more in practice 2, which has been the case so far this season. But we move to Ferrari and Charles Leclerc is P11. Finally, the fastest Ferrari-powered car, unlike last week where they were always beaten in practice by one of the Alfa Romeos. And it is good to see that he's mingling with the McLarens and the Renaults as well on the medium tyres, as both McLaren and Renault ran the softs. So that is definitely a strong performance from Leclerc, although he did have some issues flirting with the car occasionally, but all in all, a good session. Haas though, they were infinitely better than they were last week, actually got some running in this time, in front of the two Alfa Romeos who are in front of the two Williams, with Ferrari and Vettel down in P19 once again. Also with Roy Nissany filling in for Russell, I was expecting it to be Latifi this time though, as Russell did it last week, or over the Silverstone weekend I think. So I thought they'd have taken it in turns, but apparently not. It's Nissany filling in for Russell once again. And with practice 1 done and dusted, we head to practice 2, which again is headed by the two Mercedes. This time it is Lewis Hamilton on top with Valtteri Bottas P2, but hello McLaren. P3 for Lando Norris, 8 tenths back, almost 9 tenths back from Lewis Hamilton. Sainz though, P6. Incredible performance from McLaren as they used the soft tyre. And also AlphaTauri, once again, putting on the soft tyres this time, they are still there. In front of Max Verstappen, P5, who still had a little bit of issues, sometimes going a little bit wide, maybe not fully getting a decent lap together, but still P4 and P7 for the AlphaTauri squad, they could be an outside podium contender if it is a slightly shaken up race. You never know. Definitely looking good for a double point score at least for that team. But again, we've got the Racing Points down in 8th and 10th, still on the soft tyres. They haven't seemed as comfortable on these high-speed, low-downforce tracks, have they? Spa, they were nowhere, and in the race they had no pace whatsoever. And now they're still not quite there. They're mingling with Leclerc, who breaks into the top 10 and is once again the fastest Ferrari-powered car, with Vettel also bouncing up to P12 as well. He did have a little spin though, again on his own. I don't know what to say about that. I didn't really see the clip much. I just heard that he did have a little spin. It's a bit frustrating. Hopefully he doesn't have a spin in the race. But Renault. I don't know what to say about Renault. It was a weekend that they needed to capitalise. Definitely needed to capitalise on it, as they showed such strong pace in Spa, both qualifying and race pace, and it's now sort of not there. They're outside of the top 10 again, as well as in practice 1. So hopefully, maybe, possibly, practice 3, they turn it around, because if they don't, then McLaren are going to just stay in front of them. They're not going to be able to mingle with the top team or the top midfield teams. But Alex Albon, all the way down in P14. It's again his usual 6/10 gap to Max Verstappen, just over half a second, which chucks him from 5th down to 14th. That's out in Q2 kind of territory, which he definitely doesn't want in the slightest. I didn't see any issues, whether he had any engine issues. He was on the soft tyre like everybody else. I'm not sure. To be behind 3 Ferrari-powered cars, both Ferraris and an Alfa Romeo, oof. Then we have the 2 Haas cars down in 16th and 18th, with Raikkonen in between, and finally the 2 Williams actually round off the field. Not expecting that. I was not expecting both Williams to be last, and by some margin as well. Latifi half a second back from Romain Grosjean. Very disappointing from Williams. I know they've had that massive news that Claire and the Williams family as a whole is stepping down, but that shouldn't affect the car's pace. But anyway, that is it for Friday's running. Join me tomorrow for Saturday and qualifying. Well, practice 3 is all done and dusted, and hello McLaren. Wow, that was incredible pace. 2nd and 3rd. Within 3/10, should I say actually, of Bottas in the Mercedes. Hamilton though, down in P5 with the Red Bulls in 6th and 7th. But definitely a mega improvement for, I would just say, Renault as a whole. The Renault power unit, it as a whole has definitely improved, or it just much prefers doesn't really make any sense. Much prefers the high speed sort of circuits, the low downforce sort of circuits. It's got a lot of grunt behind it. But like I said just before, Red Bull down in 6th and 7th. Verstappen running his fastest time on the medium tyre, the only fastest time on the medium tyre there, with Albon within a 10th of his time. This is definitely Albon's most comfortable weekend so far, and hopefully should get into Q3 quite easily and qualify with Verstappen in order to make his race a bit more bearable. But looking slightly further down the order, we've again got the Racing Points in 9th and 10th. Their pace has just disappeared. They seemed really strong, really competitive in the first 5 or 6 races, and now it's drooping off. And they're now sort of within the midfield with, oh yeah, there you go, Racing Point has popped up. I didn't actually think I had a picture for Racing Point, but there they are. Yeah, it's a bit interesting, isn't it? It's a bit 9th and 10th. It's kind of like Spa. They just sort of struggled. And exactly the same with AlphaTauri. They have sort of gone backwards as well. A very strong Friday. Comfortably, both cars in the top 10 and at some points in the top 5. And now they're outside. They're 10th or they're 12th and 13th. Gasly in front of Kvyat. Another difficult day for Ferrari though. 11th for Leclerc, the fastest again of the Ferrari powered cars, with Vettel mingling with the Haas's and the Alfa Romeos. But it is Williams who are still struggling. P18 and P19. A little bit faster than Giovinazzi, who is the only driver above a second off of the pace of Valtteri Bottas. But still, to be P18 and P19 and behind the Ferrari-powered cars of the Alfa Romeos and the Haas's when they're at a disadvantage is a bit disappointing. But with practice 3 out of the way, we will move on to qualifying. And last year we saw a shambles. an absolute crap fest of a qualifying session. Drivers tripping over each other and no one getting to the flag apart from Carlos Sainz in Q3. Absolutely shocking to watch. And watching the F3 qualifying, Jesus Christ, it's kind of set the scene up for it to be much the same. But we will start with Q1 and Alfa Romeo. Kimi Räikkönen has made it through to Q2, I think for the second time this year. I don't want to say first, as I have a feeling I've said first time before. I just can't remember exactly what race it was. But my oh my, was Alex Albon close to being knocked out. P15, just 300ths. 35 thousandths, that's all it was between him and Grosjean. And between Albon being into Q2 and out in Q1. Definitely not the position that he would like to be, and it is a mammoth 9/10 gap to Max Verstappen in the first part of qualifying. Not at all what he wanted, considering how close he was in practice 3. But we have Sebastian Vettel, the first Ferrari out in qualifying, out in Q1. I also want to say the first time this year, but again, I could be wrong on that. I need to brush up on my statistics. I don't think he had too many issues. He had a bit of like a trip-uppy session with an Alfa Romeo as Raikkonen almost collided with Ocon. But other than that, I think that was just pace. I'm fairly sure that was just pace. And unfortunately, it is both Williams at the back and at the back by some way. Both cars 2 seconds and over 2 seconds off of the pace of Lewis Hamilton in P1, and they're both almost 4/10ths behind Giovinazzi in the Alfa Romeo, when at least in practice 3 they were in front of Giovinazzi by 3/10ths. It's not so much the same in qualifying. But looking at the rest of the field, we have a good showing from Sergio Perez in the Racing Point, and also Sainz in the McLaren, with the AlphaTauris back in the top 10 as well. The Renault sort of languishing in 11th and 12th, but with Q1 done and dusted and 5 drivers eliminated, we move to Q2, which sees Danny Kvyat, the first of our runners, out, as he is just 1/10 away from knocking out Alex Albon, as he just makes it through on the bubble again into Q3. The luckiest man in qualifying for the Italian Grand Prix by far. But Esteban Ocon in the Renault is out in P12. That's actually quite disappointing. That's very, very disappointing, considering they had such a strong showing just last week on a very similar track. They couldn't quite get the pace together, and it shows, as Ricciardo is only P9. With Leclerc qualifying probably a decent P13. I think that was the most they could have gotten out of that car. Again, the fastest of the Ferrari-powered cars, which is weird to say when he's down in P13, as he has Alfa Romeo and a Haas of Kevin Magnussen behind in P15. But as we look at the front, it does definitely look like a Mercedes pole position shootout, and even with this engine mode like locking in of one particular mode for both Saturday and Sunday, I've made a little video about the engine modes card in the corner, they're still 7.5 tenths faster than Sainz, who is P3, Perez P4, Verstappen P5, Gasly P6, then it's Stroll, Norris, Ricciardo and Albon just squidging through in P10, and those are your Q3 runners. I know what would have been helpful is if I'd have known what tyres they're on, but unfortunately I don't have that information to hand. But with Q2 out of the way, we will jump on into the Q3 shootout for the Italian Grand Prix, which sees Lewis Hamilton on pole position, a 94th career pole position, just 69 thousandths clear of teammate Valtteri Bottas, with Carlos Sainz, I think career best, matching career best P3, because I think he had a third in Austria in the first round. Perez is P4, then it is Verstappen, then Norris, Ricciardo, Stroll, Albon, all the way down in 9th place, with Gasly 10th. So a mega showing for McLaren there, and honestly a big turn up for the Renault power unit, so possibly it's been a gain having this engine mode locking from Saturday and Sunday. It's been a gain for Renault. I was about to say perhaps a loss for Red Bull and Honda, however it is a Racing Point picture that pops up next, with Racing Point being 4th and 8th. A much better showing considering their pace in Spa last week, and in front of the Red Bulls, who struggled. Yes, you can say struggled, because we have seen them consistently, or at least Verstappen anyway, behind the two Mercedes, and now he's behind the two Mercedes and also one McLaren and one Racing Point, 9/10 off. And considering Red Bull's Christian Horner was saying, oh, wait till the engine mode comes in and we're going to be closer, or Mercedes are going to be reeled in a bit, 9/10, that's one of the biggest gaps we have seen this year between Mercedes and Red Bull. And like I said at the opening of the qualifying segment, the engine mode thing hasn't really changed anything, has it, in the qualifying aspect. We'll have to see what impact it's got on the race, as it might just shake something up. Not 100% sure though, but still an 8/10 gap is pretty damn massive. But quite an interesting grid ahead of the Italian Grand Prix. Definitely Hamilton's race to lose, but it could be quite interesting with Valtteri Bottas if he can stick with him. If he can stick with Lewis Hamilton and stay within DRS range, Bottas has a chance. As I feel if Verstappen can't get in front of the McLarens and the Racing Points, the Mercedes are going to waltz away into the distance and it will just be a battle between those two. And I hope that Bottas can actually take the fight to Hamilton. There's not going to be any of the heebity-jeebity tinfoil hat conspiracy theories saying Bottas isn't able to fight him, because the championship lead is huge. There's 2 win victories between, I don't know why I call it win victories. There's 2 victories between Hamilton and Bottas in the championship. That's nothing to favour one driver over, so surely you'd want Bottas to get some more points at least, so you can favour the Constructors' Championship. But that's what I'm looking forward to, a battle at the top for the victory, and then a battle for that podium. Hopefully Sainz and Perez can get a decent start, stay P3 and P4, with Verstappen 5th. It may even be quite good to watch Verstappen maybe have a bad start, like he did in Germany last year and Austria last year, and then watch him come through the grid and take a podium. That would be exciting as well to watch. Or maybe Albon. Maybe Albon can have a decent race. I know starting P9 that may be a bit of a struggle because he's got all of that garbage to get through, the Norris, the Ricciardo and the Stroll as well to get to his teammate, which could end up seeing him put on yet another alternate strategy. But that is Saturday all concluded. Join me tomorrow for the race. Okay, are we all in agreement? Everybody, all of you, 10 out of 10. Yes? 10 out of 10? Good. That was insane. Absolutely bonkers. The race F1 needed. I was about to start an intro then, but I don't need to. This is for my race weekend segment. Oof, wow, this has been a hectic day. An incredible race. Absolutely bonkers. Without further ado, without any more interruptions and what's the word for like hectic? Is it a describing word? Which is, what is that, an adverb, verb, an adjective? I don't know, who knows. We'll look at the race result. Pierre Gasly takes a victory for AlphaTauri. From Carlos Sainz in P2, from Lance Stroll in P3, from Lando Norris in P4. Then it's Bottas, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Ocon, Kvyat and Perez are your top 10 and your point scorers. Now there is something magical about this little Italian team, AlphaTauri and Monza, when it comes to bonkers races. 12 years ago in the rain, Sebastian Vettel drove the socks off of a Toro Rosso that it was full of Minardi DNA, and he took it to pole position and the top step of the podium. And 12 years later, Pierre Gasly drove the crap out of that car and held off Carlos Sainz for the best part of half of the race and managed to win. That's bonkers. That's crazy. That is crazy. And if people didn't believe that Pierre Gasly was the driver of the season so far, the one that's flown underneath the radar, this has cemented it. This is insane. However, Kvyat, though, on the other half of the AlphaTauri garage, not quite the celebrations that he was after. Considering Pierre Gasly ended up winning, Kvyat is down in P9. Still a double point scoring race, and the team that scored the second highest points tally, only second to McLaren by just 3 points. That's not bad. Not 100% sure what happened to Kvyat, as I haven't actually seen the race. I only watched the text updates of the last about 15-20 laps, and I was on the edge of my seat, just not even listening, reading the text updates, and I was on the edge of my seat as I couldn't watch it. But my god, I wish I could. But moving from the fairy tale AlphaTauri tale, AlphaTauri tale. Wow, that was an odd saying. We move to McLaren, and finally Carlos Sainz can celebrate a podium. But what could have been? It could have been a victory, just 4 tenths at the line. Give it another lap, maximum another 2 laps, and he'd have been passed. And he would have had his very first victory, and McLaren's first victory since what? I want to say 2013, but I think it may have been 2012. But nonetheless, McLaren's second podium of 2020 and Carlos's first that he can actually celebrate, as he did score one last year in Brazil. However, that was post Hamilton's penalty. And all in all, it was an incredible day for McLaren as a team. Lando Norris P4, just 2.6 seconds off of Lance Stroll and hounding him all the way, catching near the end and managing to hold off Valtteri Bottas, or the wounded Valtteri Bottas, after a small collision I heard at the start. Again, haven't seen exactly what happened, so I don't know just yet what went down, but allegedly a small collision between Norris and Bottas wounded Bottas for the entire race, which is why he's only P5 and couldn't capitalise on Lewis Hamilton's issues. But finally Racing Point have a podium. The car that they have been talking up so much, just so much, and they finally have a result to boot. Yes, it was in a hectic race where both Mercedes and Verstappen weren't there, so you could say arguably it's not on merit, but a podium is a bloody podium, exactly like Pierre Gasly's victory is a bloody victory. However, again, like AlphaTauri, it's not all, is it trials and tribulations? Trials and celebrations. It's not all celebrations for Racing Point, as Sergio Perez finds himself down in P10. Not ideal, again, considering his teammate is on the podium. Once again, not 100% sure what happened to Sergio Perez, as I feel a lot of drivers have flown under the radar in this race and not really been spoken about much. But finally, we get to Mercedes, probably the latest they've ever been in my race weekend segment. What are they? The third or fourth team? I think they're the fourth team I've spoken about. That's never happened before. But Valtteri Bottas, a weekend that he needed to capitalise on and take back some of the points that he's lost against Lewis Hamilton. And yes he has, but only 3. Which in the grand scheme of a 17 race season in which we've already done 8 rounds, 3 points is going to do nothing to a 50 point deficit. Obviously, he was a little bit wounded, carrying some damage on some part of his car. I'm assuming it was floor damage, otherwise he would have definitely been up there because they'd have just changed the front wing if it was just front wing damage. So I'm assuming it was something along the lines of a floor damage, which is why he couldn't sustain a fight or get in front after the red flag incident, actually, which we will get onto a little bit later on. But Lewis Hamilton, finally some actual proper bad luck, and some bad luck in a big way. Comfortably leading, just in the bag, comfortably leading, right up until Kevin Magnussen and the safety car issue, and then right up until the red flag with Charles Leclerc. The pit lane was closed, just as he came in. He was rounding the Parabolica. He must have had the call to come into the pits when the pit lane was open, otherwise they wouldn't have called him in. And then it closed going around the Parabolica, but he still came into the pit lane, which is a huge no-no, and a 10-second stop-and-go penalty, which cost him around 33 seconds race time, which plopped him, bearing in mind after a red flag incident everyone basically starts again, that plopped him all the way at the back and buggered his entire race. But he did have an incredible charge through the field to finish P7, continuing his point-scoring streak, and managed to bag the fastest lap on the way to P7 as well. But Renault, what a crap race from Renault. Like, I'm sorry to be so mean after celebrating the first couple of teams, but Renault, that was crap, wasn't it? Considering they had an insane engine. McLaren, P2 and P4, Renault weren't anywhere. And considering last week, they showed such promise and they were borderline podium contenders, they couldn't take advantage of this hectic race. Granted, a lot could have happened and a lot went on in this race, but they should have capitalised a squidge more, and now they've lost so many points to McLaren. It's going to hurt them. This one is going to hurt them a lot. And Williams. We're actually mentioning Williams sort of in the midway of this segment. That's insane. Latifi was P11. Borderline point. Well, I say borderline. He was 10 seconds off of points. But again, just there. And unfortunately, Russell couldn't take advantage of this hectic race exactly like Williams need to do. That's how they can score some points this year, is they take advantage of these crazy races, but they couldn't quite do it. Just so nearly there, but not quite. And Haas is a bit of a funny one. So I've mentioned Magnussen a little bit earlier on, in the Mercedes segment of this section. He retired, I can't remember exactly why, but he pulled off causing a safety car, which was the start of all of the mayhem. And then Grosjean ended up P12. A bit of an odd one for Haas, definitely. But still, a solid-ish race. Maybe could have hoped for some points. But Alfa Romeo, I don't have any pictures of their cars, mainly because I just want to leave this here. I just want to display this picture. Lap 29 out of 53. Just over halfway distance. P2 and P3. P2 and P3. And they finished P13 and P16. I'm sorry, that's bad. That car has no race pace. None. If they fell from P2 and P3 with 24 laps to go, or 25 laps to go, and they've fallen well outside of the points. It's not like they finished P11 and P12 and were hassling Perez. Like, they're last. Giovinazzi is last of all of the race runners, and last by a monumental way, and then Raikkonen is P13. I'm sorry, that shouldn't happen. You should at least hold on to the points paying positions, but that car doesn't have any race pace whatsoever. And penultimately, Red Bull. This is definitely the latest that Red Bull have appeared in this segment. Max Verstappen retires on lap 30 due to a suspected power unit issue. I saw a Honda tweet come out. I'm not 100% sure where he was in relation to everybody else after Hamilton's penalty, but I would imagine he would have been up thereabouts maybe. But I don't really know, because looking at Albon, he was only P15. So perhaps this new technical directive has actually hurt Red Bull as the Honda-powered car more than it has AlphaTauri, because clearly they've done exceptionally well. But we will have to wait a couple more races before we realise the true impact of this technical directive and exactly what impact it has had. And finally, the moment you've been waiting for, Ferrari. You didn't think it could get much worse than Styria, could you? But it did. At Monza. Be glad there was no fans, I suppose. Vettel having brake issues, retiring very early in the race, smashing through some polystyrene, and then Charles Leclerc having a massive off at Parabolica, crashing in to the barriers at high speed on the exit of Parabolica, causing that red flag, which was the start of the mayhem. Not a pretty weekend for the prancing horse, and hopefully in the next Italian Grand Prix in just a week's time at Mugello, they can hopefully pull it a bit together. And quickly we will just have a look at the championships. Lewis Hamilton still leads the way, 47 points clear from Valtteri Bottas now, who has moved back above Verstappen after he failed to score any points. Lando Norris is now P4 from Stroll, from Albon, who slips to 6th, then Leclerc as Gasly leaps up to 8th, with Ricciardo, then Sainz, Perez, Ocon, Vettel, Hülkenberg, Kvyat, Giovinazzi and Magnussen, with Latifi, Raikkonen, Russell and Grosjean still yet to score. Then on the other side, we've got Mercedes extending their championship lead after having a doozy of a race up to Mercedes standards after Red Bull had a double no-point score. Then McLaren are now third, ahead of Racing Point, with Renault moving above Ferrari for P5, then AlphaTauri thrusting themselves up towards that midfield fight, then Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams. Again, I've got some nice little visualizations of all this data. We've got Mercedes and Verstappen storming out in front of all of this midfield jargon, and then the constructors, again, much the same. Mercedes miles in front of Red Bull, who are miles in front of the midfield, with AlphaTauri, you can see, quite nicely joining that group. Also though, just before we end, here is the Formula 1.5 season. I have excluded both Mercedes and Verstappen as well. I've then shuffled everybody else up and formed this new championship. So it's not simply just taking out the top 3 drivers from the championship and giving them the scores. They each have new scores based on every race taking out the top 3 drivers, both Mercedes and Verstappen. And after Italy, we have Lance Stroll leading Alex Albon from Norris, from Leclerc, from Ricciardo, from Perez, and then Gasly. And in the Constructors' Championship, it is Racing Point who lead the way on 171 points, from McLaren on 157, then Renault, Ferrari P4, and then it's Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and Williams at the bottom. But that is all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed that race weekend review for Italy. Join me next week for the race weekend review for the Mugello Grand Prix, or the Tuscany Grand Prix, whichever they decide to call it.